And this is actually one of the reasons that I love our dynamic.
Awesome.
Yeah. So please roll into it.
So when all of the virus stuff started coming up and reaching sort of cultural zeitgeist level, what occurred to me, and I never wrote the article, but I thought of writing an article about how this to me felt like a global Rorschach test, right? So, and it's interesting because like I'm wearing my brand t-shirt, but it looks kind of like an ink blot. It's a whole bunch of like actual people put together, but sort of the idea of it is you can see whatever you want inside of it. And so like certain images pop up at people looking at the t-shirt. The Rorschach test, which this was sort of based on, is that idea. And so even though we might not be in completely different dimensions in the way that we think of dimensions as some sort of cartoony fantasy thing, I don't know that you think of it that way, but often I do. But I'm a guy who has Lego Batman on his desk. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. And a unicorn. But the idea that we're all seeing what is familiar to us reflected back. Yeah. Right? So even me seeing a Rorschach test and a wonderful opportunity to dive into and explore and experience humanity is a reflection of me. And other people who have been seeing conspiracy theories everywhere for a long time, they're seeing conspiracy theories everywhere. They might not call them conspiracy theories. And that tends to be a reflection of them. And so it's a really fascinating question of like, are we living in different dimensions and realities? Fly just landed on my third eye. Because I think we are. And my curiosity is how do we maybe not totally merge them, but find a Venn diagram version of merging our realities so that we can quit all the silly conflict that I don't think is really all that necessary. Right. Because I think we're mostly coming from the same place.
Right. Yeah. Well, so then this brings through another question of how much of the reality is the reality that we're selecting perceptually, and how much is there any type of a collective agreement? Because is there a collective?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating question. I mean, I'm looking, like I'm giving you the worst view of my place, like with the white wall here, right? So I'm in Bali. For those of you watching, you know that I'm in Bali. Anyone else who's watching might not. And so I have this really beautiful view of jungle. And the idea that the blue sky that I'm seeing is not the same shade of blue that you're seeing, right? The green foliage is not the same like shade of, and it's not just one shade, it's a bunch of different, but you know what I mean? We're seeing different things on even just like a basic level in terms of color. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that we're experiencing some sort of like unified collective version of reality is such an illusion that we buy into for comfort.
Right.
And there's certain tropes that we're like, oh yeah, we totally agree on this. And it's just not true. Like mm-hmm. Most people, like the fascinating thing has been, again, Rorschach test, right? Watching people inside of quarantine get to know their families for the first time, mm-hmm. their partners, right? Realizing that just showing up for dinner isn't necessarily the same as having a connective relationship. And the people that are closest, so many people don't know anything about their inner circle. And so like, if we're operating from the place of green is different to me than it is to you, but we don't stop to question that most of the time, then what else are we not stopping to question is what mm-hmm. I question.
Yes, that's beautiful. Because actually even built into that inherently is empathy, really. The capacity to really shift outside of our own frame for a series of moments, shift into a new frame, and live that reality through with no judgment, no agenda, no desire to shift it, just to have the experience of what it would be to experience reality through the perceptual lens of another. So it's almost like hopping into somebody else's novel, somebody else's storybook, and finding a sense of true joy and meaning in the sharing of that story, the experience of what it might be like to live life and experience reality through another's perception.
I love that. Things are clicking as you're saying that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like that connection of, so it's like entering into it with curiosity, like, ooh, like, what do you see? What are you experiencing? And so how do you think that this all plays into, this is a fact, yes.
Can we pause on that?
Yeah.
Like if you can sort of grip on that question. And I want to talk about the judgment piece for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think the most dangerous judgment piece is the judgment of our judgment.
Yes.
And like, I don't know that I'm not judgmental. I'm judgmental as, can I swear on this? I'm extremely judgmental. The Canadian in me is like, But what I try not to do is judge my judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I see so many people falling into the trap of feeling bad about feeling bad. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm in a bad mood today. I shouldn't be in a bad, and then it just amplifies as opposed to, oh, I'm in a bad mood today. Full stop. Right? Yeah. That can be a judgment. Bad is a judgment on what just is, right? And we can maybe parse it out. But I'm human and I judge things. We make meaning. Yeah. But to keep in that spiral, I think, is to lose our divinity. And so for me, I think it's hugely important to not pretend that I'm some pious, non-judgmental person.
Yeah.
But the idea of still being curious about myself and others. As you were talking, there's a TV show from when I was young that I loved, and I still love. And I might go back and watch. The opening makes me tear up. It's kind of why I framed the opening of my podcast to sound like it does. And the show's called Quantum Leap. Mm-hmm. And theorizing that time travel was possible within his own lifetime, Dr. Sam Beckett stepped into the Quantum Leap accelerator and vanished. And yeah, this is what's in my head. So this main character, played by Scott Bakula, would be dropped into people's lives, and his consciousness would take over their body. And he had this cohort from the future. He was from the future, who showed up as a hologram that only he could see, who would give him the basics of the situation. Yeah. And because there was a different consciousness in this person's body, he could problem solve in ways that person couldn't in their own life often. Yeah. And the character didn't always love the situations he was dropped in. Every episode started with, oh boy, because there were usually weighty episodes that were life-changing moments. And some of those are hard. Yeah. Many of those are really hard.
Yeah.
And so there's judgment inside of that, right? He had to play different kinds of characters, and some, again, really distasteful. And so there's something around that I think helped shape me at a young age. Of, like, I remember watching footage of Hitler on the Discovery Channel, and he's walking through the Bavarian forest. And then he had a movie night set up that night. He had a projector set up in some castle or something. But just the fact that he liked to walk in the forest and go watch movies, and he wasn't screaming. There was a certain amount of like, oh, that screamy guy might be inside of me too. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important if we can park our judgment enough to realize that those monstrous elements that are so much more comfortable if you push away are in us. And then to see, like, I don't agree with pretty much everything that he did. I like movies and walks in the forest and painting. As far as I know, those are the three things that I share in common.
He's an extraordinary example of what it is to not resist the self. And I think the same thing with Trump and what I'm hearing you say too. It's a similar, because that, I mean, for me to judge the judgment is so uncomfortable because I'm creating this dynamic tension of separation, which is not possible. So I'm trying to separate from something or resist or push away or push out from something that I actually have to harmonize to in order to access the depth of my own power and potential. And so having that constant dynamic tension, and I can attest to that in my own experience, that is my biggest point of resistance, is when I know something, see something, hear something, feel something, my intuition is telling me something, and what I try to do is manufacture other people's divinity instead of just being fully with the isness of what's actually presenting, which is not led to very great things over an extended period of time. Because, you know, then you're holding that. Well, really, in that scenario, you're literally holding that hologram for someone. In the moment that you break attention, if they're not conscientiously selecting it with you, if that character's not doing that dance in a way that's natural and without resistance, it just shatters. It just completely like breaks down and rearranges itself into what's natural for it.
It's also a whole world of people saying, I wish I could be seen.
Yeah, that has been a thing lately too. I've felt I've become incredibly sensitive to where there's walls and barriers, where there's power dynamics, where there is, that deep desire to receive love and to experience love, but not the openness fully for it. And the ways at which that protection mechanism shows up. And then, hear me, see me, feel me, know me. Here I am. Here's my voice. Hear me, accept me, validate me, hold me, love me. And, and it's all just, it all comes down to that focalized point of, I think at the core of it all, we just all want to feel love. We all want to feel love wherever it's originating from, ideally within, but as humans and as animals, to receive love from other humans is also an essential component of growth and development and safety and connection and expansion, all our evolution, and the thrival of our species. And so, but it always comes down to that focal point. In my own journey, it's like whenever I think it's another thing, my soul just drives me back to the core. It's like,
You touched on something earlier that I want to underline because it's been hugely important in my life and my work, and the resistance to the isness. Right? I think that it ties back to what we were talking about before, how people often aren't relating to the same things, right? And so one of the things that I think becomes very difficult is the idea and the relationship to the word acceptance. And that accepting what is doesn't mean approving of what is and staying there. But it means what is. And I often will equate it to a "you are here" sticker on a map. And if we're pretending or trying to force that "you are here" sticker somewhere other than we are because we don't like where we're standing, it doesn't actually change our surroundings, but it makes it really difficult to navigate out of them. And so to be able to say, what is. Okay, so there is a global pandemic. Some people think that it's real. Some people think that it's fake. Some people don't know what to think and are hiding. And there are racial tensions that have been going on for a long time that are now expanding. Some people think that the next wave is going to be aliens. There are already big fires. And so, okay. Do we want that to be what's happening right now? I don't particularly want this to be what's happening right now. But not accepting that that's what's happening now will drive me insane. And I think that most people who are struggling are resisting what is in some area.
Yes. Another question that comes then is, what is in the eye of the beholder, and which one of those realities do we decide to select and land in? This one of the things that is coming up for me is like exponential quantum calibration, but just having a willingness to let things go and let things come in, let things go, let things come in without any judgment, any resistance, any meaning making around. It's just the resonance, following the flow of the resonance itself and going, okay, is this in resonance? Is this not in resonance? And some of the stuff that has occurred in my reality during this entire quarantine, like it's like opening it's a fantasy sci-fi novel. It's like, really, is that actually happening? Is this going on? How did that happen? And I'm just, there's been moments where, I mean, it's so evident to me that I'm just I select a pretty paradise-like personal experience, and there's been some glitchy stuff that's been going on, and I'm like, whoa, what's that energy and why is this happening? And I'm just kind of being with the strangeness of it. It's been strange. And so trying not to judge that has been one of my own biggest points of resistance, because I'm used to there being a certain amount of synchrony and pure flow. And so to have like all the glitches, and I'm like, oh, this is a different kind of movement. This is like, how am I staying in this flow, in this dance? And listening to some of the stories and the feedback that I'm receiving from others, and I'm like, I wake up and I go for a walk in the wild, like fields of the most glorious wildflowers. They're so stunning. I'm like, these exist. I'm like, these species of plant exist, and there's just fields upon fields, and I'm just in a whole different world, a whole different reality. And then within the context of that, going, okay, and so what is leadership? Is it just creation? Is it pure creation? I feel that a lot of the novels that have been architected, and trying to get whole groups of people to kind of go in this direction or that direction instead of just moving with the tides of their nature, all of that's going to come, it's not going to uphold, it's going to have to take on a natural rhythm. So it's just been fascinating to watch all of this, because I've known that nothing is going to carry forward as we have known it. But to be just like right in that space of new birth, of pregnancy, really is what it feels like.
I feel like I'm going to have to start taking notes, just because you said so much there that I want to like, yeah, the idea. All right. So I'm going to agree with you in a way that might seem like I'm disagreeing with you. But it's, I think false dichotomy of either we're imposing our will on something or going with nature, right? Like there's a bias there that everything natural is better, forgetting that we are also natural. And like what we're doing is what humans do. And so I don't know that natural is necessarily like, I know how people tend to mean it, and yet part of the men's groups that I facilitate, I'm like, okay, everyone here, you're a man. How you're doing things is how men do things. Now, there's a lot of variation there. How do we want to be doing things? Because the idea that like man up is at all helpful or means something specific is kind of ridiculous. And I think it's a similar thing here. I think that the metaphor of sailing occurs to me, that like I don't want to be bobbing in nature. I want to be on a sailboat, right? And
white squall ahead.
like I want to be in a properly outfitted sailboat in the ocean, right? It doesn't have to be like an aircraft carrier, like that imposing, but the ability to play with nature, right, and have some control, but the illusion of control, even on like almost any boat, is an illusion, right? And so it's that interplay of how can we bring order and structure. So you asked earlier, and I forget exactly the wording, but I'm going to take it in a certain direction. People will talk about trust your gut, trust your intuition. My gut goes in different directions depending on my whims, my fancy. When I used to drink, my gut would say, you know, it's a really good idea to go get street hot dogs at 3 a.m. And like, that felt like a wonderful idea. Now that I don't drink alcohol, it feels like a really great idea to drink this green sludge powder mix that I made of 15 different ingredients and superfoods. And the first time I had it, I thought, I'm never having this again. It's so bitter. But as I've trained myself to realize that I feel better when I drink it, I go in that direction, and it's actually altered my taste buds.
Yeah.
And so my view of it is, which version of us are we going to choose and then allow? And that sort of interplay of the yin and yang, I think, is necessary. Yeah. And where I think we often get lost is people will advocate for one or the other, forgetting that we're meant to be an interplay of both. Each one of us is an interplay of both.
Yes.
Right? And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's just feeling into when I do peak performance flow trainings, I just simplify it down into those two spaces. We either need replenishment or we're in flow. And it's one of those two. So gauging, when do we need to go into our yin, our feminine, receptive, magnetic replenishment, restoration, recovery, which encompasses, people normally cycle through the different brainwave states in that realm. And then we're in gamma. We're in pure superflow. We're in the space of electric, masculine, expressive energy. And being able to do that dance inside of our reality cohesively in congruence with ourself, so that we don't have peaks and valleys, like not extreme peaks and valleys, so that there's, you know, a certain level of coherency that is maintained throughout our experience. And I think they're both, I mean, obviously they're both essential for the thrival of life and well-being. But something that I'm fascinated by is when, where, and why did we actually create the duality in our brain, the right and the left hemisphere? Why did we become dual? Why did? And
I don't think we are. Like I'm sitting here waiting to yes and you, but like I think that the replenishment and flow, and sometimes there's a, I don't have the third word, but like I said with the green sludgy powder mix that I have every morning, some things don't feel flowy, but are in my best interest.
Right. Yes.
And so there's something about standing in that discomfort that I think gets cheated out of the way when we think everything either needs to be like flowy or we need to recover. Those are essential elements. And we also need to be able to stand in discomfort sometimes. And I think people sometimes stand in too much discomfort. And that's where the flow and replenishment is like vital. But some people, right? A lot of people where I live spend a lot of time in flow to the point that they can't make a lunch plan.
Well, I'm talking about precision flow versus...
Which might be a different distinction and that I don't fully know. And this is where like defining terms is so important, right? Because we're both decently intelligent and educated, and yet we're approaching the word flow possibly from different places, which I think is fascinating.
Yes. And even just feeling into the dynamism of the two places and spaces, because that's something that I've had to look at, where I where I want to allow what kind of flow in my own life, because I've got, I run a tight ship, and if things aren't fully, I mean, I'm super flexible in the context of that. We've danced a bit, and I'm good with that. But if it's so often that, like you said, like a lunch state cannot be kept, and at some point you're just like, I'm draining my energy. I'm not, like this isn't actually landing somewhere. And so when I'm feeling into flow, I'm thinking beings that are fully calibrated to super intelligence, super abundance, super divinity, you can call it, there's just the super mind of source, and we're in the present moment, and we're embodied in that, and we're conscientiously architecting our story, our reality, our novel, and braiding the masculine and the feminine together. So if my intuition says, now it's time to go into a deep theta meditation, or my intuition says, now it's time to go for a hike or a run and get sweaty and jump in the ocean, or it's time to build some structural components into the expansion, the scaling of your business and your service and your courses and your programs and your products and all that. And to be so dialed in to hearing what is being called for in the moment, that all of those pieces form a cohesive whole. But being so lasered into what's being asked for from moment to moment in our experience, and not negating any of them. So it's such a high level of dynamism, because those things are going to be required from each of us in different moments, and it's so unique unto the individual, which is why I love things like aura technology. So when people come into my courses, they get all this tech so that they can see what's going on for them uniquely, and instead of playing the guessing game or self-judging or getting into a rut or being an overactivity to the point where they hit the wall, they can actually look at their measurements and what's happening and decipher what they need for high efficiency and well-being and all of this.
That's why I think we're agreeing with each other, just like learning each other's terminology, right?
You're enmeshed in that kind of that realm of flow.
I'm surrounded by it. Yeah. I feel like I, especially lately, have really been doing a solid job of bringing more precision and purpose to my existence, and holding that in the face of a type of flow that I feel is, again, the judgment. It doesn't seem to serve even the people who are living inside of it for the most part. There's some people who need that space, but essentially precision flow is adding the element that I'm talking about. It's having precise to what. So having a purpose and replenishment practice that, when united, brings flow, is how it's landing for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Purpose and replenishment. Because you've got directionality.
Yeah.
So what I have found, and this has been in my own experience, if I feel a drag in my energy, I'm like, something doesn't have clear direction and something's not headed in a trajectory. And now I need to go into the field and identify what that is, and I need to suss it out, because for me, I'm so clear on what I'm doing and where I'm going and what I'm creating. And if I introduce components that are going to come in and rock the boat, it actually requires I can still do it. So there's a degree of mastery that is evoked in that realm. But it's like, okay, now you actually do have a white squall on your hands, and you're sailing this sailboat, which like the back of your hand. You know which direction you're headed. You actually even know the ocean pretty damn well. So how are you going to navigate and work with this to continue on that trajectory without allowing it to come and swallow you whole and take you under? And if there's
that's where some of that mastery can be dangerous, because sometimes people are like, I can endure, and they forget to replenish.
Yeah, that's
right. And so right now, we haven't really got into it, but 9.5 months ago, I broke my skull and almost died, and I had to learn how to walk again, talk again, be again. And so lately, I've just been focusing on building capacity. My physical training, I'm building capacity. My work and business, just building capacity. And it's taking away this pressure to have to perform at some peak high level when I'm in a building capacity phase. But it's building quickly because I've been allowing that replenishment to be part of the system. But I had to exhaust myself a few times, since my injury, to drop into what was necessary. Mm-hmm. And this is with people around the world reminding me, hey, Nick, you broke your skull 9 months ago. You couldn't see straight for months and had to walk with a cane. You can give yourself a little bit of a break. It's like, oh, yeah. And I know this stuff here, right? So dropping it down to different types of knowing has been essential. A lot of people who come to me for business coaching, it's because they're not replenishing. I call it the area of play, right? Kind of because it triggers people. They're like, I can't play yet. I haven't worked hard enough yet. I haven't hit these quotas yet, or whatever, these milestones. And because they're not replenishing themselves, they're getting drained and resentful. Mm-hmm. And especially when they're entrepreneurs, if they're drained and start resenting their business, well, they stop doing stuff, right? They might have like the check boxes checked. Like, look, no, I'm busy. What do you mean? It's like, but it's not hitting the same way that it used to. Yeah. And so I've had people who, through realizing that, forced themselves to take 2 weeks to just go surfing. And then like at some cafe, someone heard them on the phone and they closed like a $300,000 deal sitting at the cafe, some random person that was there just because they were like in such a great space after surfing. Yes. For like a week and a half, right? And so I think that replenishment piece doesn't get enough weight in some areas. Yeah. And I think it gets too much weight in some areas. Some people need to get going. And it's that balance. Yeah.
This is glorious. I mean, that's just the art of manifestation itself, is that the frequency is doing the work. So whether you're surfing or whether you're deep in it in some logistical task, oftentimes if you're just in the logistical and your being is telling you to go surf, you're actually holding away the result, and you keep holding it away, and you actually then start to push it away. And it's like you could go surf, and then you could have that wild synchronicity arise in the moment that you least expect it. But it's like, on some level, my being actually has always known that this was the appropriate way to actually receive all that I'm desiring. And that's the glory of it, because it is so simple and natural, and it's
there's
so
an
much
allowing.
More fun. Yeah.
There's an allowing that can be really challenging there, and I can share something that's vulnerable to me inside of that, and just the idea of manifestation. When I am highly energized, things show up quickly, and I have had to call myself out on how I haven't allowed myself to stay highly energized for stretches of time for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so I never got into, even though I made a comment about like when I used to drink, it was so much less than everyone around me. I don't think I ever had a drinking problem, and I've never had a drug problem. Like substances were something, like I don't drink coffee, like to a fairly large extent. I mean, I have this green sludge drink every day now, but other than that, substances have not been a thing that I've been addicted to. I don't think I'm addicted to this either. But states. Mm-hmm. And the idea that a lot of people aren't addicted to the substance, they're addicted to the numbing. Mm. And the substance is a pathway to the numbing. And so I had a lot of trauma and stuff in my life early that shook my sense of deserving. And so when I'm rested and vibrant, people want me to lead their groups. Women come out of everywhere, and not having had a strong sense of like knowing how to hold boundaries. Mm. I didn't know how to do anything other than having a built-in excuse of saying, I'm tired, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm less attractive when I'm tired and sort of dragging myself around. So, yeah. But I remember this one time in my life where it's like, no, I'm going to go to sleep at this time every night, and I'm going to take a nap every day at this time. Yeah. And after 3 days, I was buzzing.
Yes. Yes.
And then within a 2-day period, 3 girls who I didn't know much grabbed my face and kissed me at random times. They didn't know each other. This wasn't a plot. This was just like, I was buzzing. They thought that was attractive, and they made a move. And I went into, oh, am I being a bad person? Right? I have such a strong sort of monogamous, even when I'm single, thing, right? That I went into shame and proceeded to not go to bed before 1 a.m. for the next 3 days. Just like in bed playing solitaire on my phone or whatever. It wasn't anything actually fun. It was just me feeling bad and exhausting myself, but I was able to watch that. So we talk about manifestation. What I run into with myself and my clients, and I guess it's me doing research, doing it with myself, the allowing to live their dream and manifest it is a huge part. Finding safety and permission to allow those visions really ends up being the key component to my work with myself and with my clients. And once there's a clear pathway forward, then they can move forward. And so often we overcomplicate it. But yeah, it's a huge part.
It's super huge. And even as a feminine, I would say my energy, I have a natural inclination into king energy more than I do queen energy. So me learning how to receive has been the biggest challenge. And when I know that I need to receive and I know that I need to replenish, I will go, what can I do? And I will start doing the thing. And so it's not on my phone. It's not on technological devices as such, but it is, let me bury myself in my work and in production and in creating something and in the 5,000 things that I can be doing until the point that, I'm exhausted. And it actually, my greatest method of, I just dropped like 3K on all these things to bring like the next level synergy to my own health and well-being and that balance between all components. I'm like, that we're getting the sleep diet. We're going to the next level. Like what that next level is for me, we're dialing it in. We're dialing in the sleep. We're dialing in all these different aspects. And so instead of play for me at this point, although play, my reality is constantly reminding me to play. And so it's beautiful because I'm in shame thinking I'm not doing enough. And my reality is like, hey, why don't you just go play? Why don't you just, and I'm like, sometimes it just is such a breath of fresh air. I'm like, oh, thank you for being so benevolent. And there's this book called Feel Free to Prosper. And those are the words that, for me, it evokes that sensation of play where it's like, actually all that I need to do is drop into a space where I feel free, where it's like, I might have all these commitments and these things that I've devoted to, and all of these creative collaborations are in the works. And with that, a high level of decision that is required. And that has been a new calibration for me lately, because the decisions I have had to be much more precising in my decision-making process and a lot more rapid than I've ever been before too. Like being able to identify right off the bat, like what is actually solid, integral, real, loyal, anchored, that has a capacity to expand from a space of solidity and not just, whipping around in the wind in the middle of the ocean. And to be keen to those things and make those choices, but also to feel free myself within the dance of that. So sometimes I just need to give myself a half a day. I'm working on like the whole day. 3 days would be magnificent. I know that, in 3 days, you literally can rebuild your entire immune system, the whole thing wow, I just got a really profound insight as I was sharing that. That's, wow. Hilarious. And the answer to one of my own deepest explorations lately. so silly. I've known the
I
whole
love
time.
that.
But it's like, feel free. Just give yourself 6 hours to set it down. Like, stop. And so with that, I was outside the other night. This was so great. It was around the actually a friend and I we did some body work and some just deep connecting in around the time of the first eclipse. And we got back to my space and we're looking at the sky and there's this massive moon, right? And so it's just in that kind of realm of, okay, we've got eclipse season, all the planets are in retrograde. My ruling planet is Venus, which is love, beauty, sexuality, wealth, like all of those real sensuous, earthy things, it's all in retrograde. So, which normally doesn't impact me, but I'm going to be just completely forthright and vulnerable. This month has been like, I have questioned what reality is on multiple occasions, and being aware of the transient, multifaceted nature of all things, and being able to see multiple dimensions simultaneously, continuously, like I'm on a constant, the way that I relate my gifts sometimes that's most easy for people to understand usually is if you've ever done a microdose of acid. And it's like being on a microdose all the time, but it's actually because I've become so organic in my own embodiment, where everything that I have, things I wash my clothes with, what I put on my body, my makeup, everything is all like apothecary. It's all built from nature. And so I've just kind of adapted myself to that realm of malleability where I'm able to engage and interact with my reality in that way. And there's just been moments where I'm like, what's going on? And I've just been with the oddness of it and the strangeness and melted in. And so I was outside, coming back into the more mystical realms of around this eclipse, and there was such a cool breeze, and the trees were just speaking to me, and I was really just kind of admiring their holographic, just seeing their holographic components and how they're just there, built up from the earth, and they're just kind of blowing in the wind. And I'm like, wow, what a fascinating and stunning creative landscape. And I'm just having this dance, and then in the background, this pack of coyotes just start just roaring, just all dancing off of each other's tones. And I'm just like, yes, thank you. And then these barred owls start to hoot. And what is it when there's it's like the perfect synergy of it's the harmony and the melody and the harmony. No, I mean, I feel like the melody and but anyways, they were just playing this gorgeous symphony off of one another. And so there's this whole wild orchestra unfolding. And then that moment, it just made everything that I do that is so scheduled and so planned and so in devotion to everything except for experiencing that sense of like raw wilderness. So like, I'm just gonna like let all that down, set all that down. And actually, there are a couple of places and spaces where I kind of want to see how people respond to that, because people are used to me being very, very like faithful, loyal. I show up, I do this, and I've just decided to shift a couple of things, not in a big way, not in like this like overhaul. Everything's getting changed. I still have deep consideration for other beings and their world. But I've played with it a little bit. I'm like, what would be the worst thing that could possibly happen if I just play with this a little bit? And if I open up a dialogue for different possibility, and in some cases just set some things down entirely, and just allowing there to be that flex and that play with it without it all needing to be so life or death.
Yeah.
Has been so liberating. And I'm like, I'm just going to feel free in this, and I'm going to stop judging myself in a way that, because I feel like there's a deep value to judgment and discernment versus the kind of judgment that is self-deprecating on some level, whether it's towards ourselves or our reality, that creates unnecessary tension and pain, versus like, this is a thing that's unfolding, and this could be as equally perfect as this thing that's unfolding, depending on the overarching viewpoint that I have around that thing, which I actually think is what true oneness is, unity consciousness, being able to look at to find the pristineness in that which is holy, in that which is, I'm like, what is the word that I'm looking for? Profane. And the holy and the profane, but in them, to see the beauty and the perfection, to see the divinity, regardless of the judgment that's placed on. And that, I feel like that to me is where the actual gold is.
I like alliteration, so my brain groups finding the perfection in the profound and the profane.
Ah, that's glorious.
And yeah. I think so much of the theme of this conversation for me has been about that balance, right? Like, I've tried to structure in chaos time, right? And I don't think chaos needs to be destructive, but it's like, okay, this is the time where I get to do this. Even like that wondering with nature, right? I bought these like high-end little lenses for my phone camera, and they screw onto the special case that I got. And this one's a wide angle and macro lens. I've got the telephoto on right now. The macro lens, though, is something that I'll bring with me all the time, and I'll explore the mundane through this literal lens that allows me to see it differently than I would with my own eyes. And so constantly sourcing wonder, right? Just looking at a stone or concrete or wall and looking at it up close and discovering that, right? It's so easy to miss the profound, thinking that the profound needs to be profound all of the time. I am God. Bow down before me. Like, if everything is God, then it's our task to live in wonder, I think.
Just speechlessness. Just the nectar. It's like the piercing through the mundane. Piercing into the mundane is where the wonder lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the end of the movie Beetlejuice, when one of the like side characters all of a sudden sees all of the dancers. And he's like, have they been here the whole time? Right? Yeah. Like that image just popped into my mind. It's a throwback for some people. But yeah, I think we can, it's this constant feeling of, no, the sacred is out there somewhere, that I think hurts us so much. Because it's not that that's false. The sacred is out there. And this is also part of out there. Right here is part of out there. And I remember one time I didn't get into ecstatic dance at the yoga barn. They started overselling and having to close off so that the building wouldn't collapse or something, because there's so many people. And it was a friend's birthday and everyone that I knew was there, but instead of going and getting a ticket a little early, I went home, showered to get ready to get sweaty, and showed up just a little bit late. And I turned into a pain in the ass. I was like, yoga is about flexibility, and you're really not being flexible right now. I don't appreciate this. Like,
great tactic.
There's not a lot of people here, right? Just let me in. and they're like, no. And so I was pissed. I was really angry. And I didn't want to go home angry like that. And so like I caught myself in this pouty state and not getting what I wanted immediately. And there was this Ganesha statue in the courtyard in front of the entry space. And I mean, dude's dad cut his head off, realized it, and put on an elephant's head because that's the same thing. And I was like, you're okay now. And Ganesha just had to roll with it,
Yeah.
right? And dance with life and overcome obstacles. And all that happened to me was I didn't get into the party that I wanted to be in, right? Still in Bali, still healthy, happy. Like, wasn't happy for that moment. Anyway, I decided in that moment to reorient space. And so where I was standing in front of that Ganesha statue was now sacred space for me. No one else got to tell me where the party was. So I didn't miss the awesome space. This was the awesome space. That's also the awesome space. It wasn't to take away from anyone else, right? It wasn't, trying to draw away their fun. It's like, you have fun in your awesome space. This is also an awesome sacred space. And I started dancing in front of the statue, just in the courtyard in front of the venue. And then I was joined by a couple people, and then a couple more. And by the end, there was like 30 of us. And they let us in for the last 15 minutes of dance. And we invaded the dance floor like a swarm of barbarians. We just had so much energy, more energy than the people who were inside. And it was like, whoa, they certainly felt it. But it was like loving, peaceful barbarians.
Benevolent barbarians.
And then by the end, I went to dinner with some of my new friends. I wished my friend whose birthday it was happy birthday. But I kept hanging out with these new people that I'd met and had this experience with. Yeah. And that's what comes up. Like often, I think it's just about realizing that we've put the wrong sticker on the product. And it's like, oh, no, this isn't mundane. Right? It's like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, or probably a little more apt to this right now, or Roberto Benigni in Life is Beautiful. Constantly bringing a sense of wonder into one of the most awful experiences that humans have had in history, right? Yeah. And all I'm saying is, can I still enjoy my life in Bali with like minor quarantine or not getting into the party that I want? Yes, I can.
Yeah. It's just like the ultimate power of choice in every moment. And it's fascinating because
it doesn't always feel like that's there. And so to stop and notice, like you were saying, like where does the energy, where did that go? And how can I click that back on? It can take some work, but I do think it is a power of choice.
Yes, same. Like in this moment, I'm going to decide my state no matter what's going on. Or I'm going to decide that I feel free, or I'm going to decide to enjoy this, or I'm going to decide. I am going to be at choice instead of judging what I think may be unfolding that could potentially, and usually always is, something that I love to track.
That's where that oomph energy is for me. That oomph energy that I was like, like flow and what was the other word? There's an R. Replenishment. Like just for now, because we haven't found the word, like that oomph, that like, because it's not like, oh, I'm going to choose and now I'm in flow. It's like sometimes it's like I'm going to sit here in my discomfort and resentment and judginess because I know that doesn't serve my highest self. And I'm going to endure and dance in front of this stone statue until I get over it. Like, that didn't feel good at first, right? I skipped ahead, but that choice was a choice to go through discomfort, not go home and hide.
Catharsis, like self-selected catharsis to move the energy. Oh my goodness. Yes, sometimes it's absolutely essential to go there, especially when we have new energy that wants to break through. Oh, and it's so good. Even if it's so uncomfortable. It's like it burns so good. It's like, like you just feel the depth of that fire raging through your system, at whatever level it may be presenting itself.
It's like great, like annoying advice. One time I was trying to talk to my dad. I was like, oh, I'm feeling really depressed. He's like, are you? Or are you just in a bad mood? And I felt so dismissed and not heard. And then I was like, what if I just take on that I'm in a bad mood? and let myself not be depressed as a stuck state.
Mm-hmm.
And just as an experiment.
Yeah.
And turns out I was in a bad mood. And I had been in a bad mood for weeks. But like the studies that are showing that like emotions typically only exist in our bodies for 90 seconds, and we might keep hitting the like, yeah, renew.
Uh-huh.
I was renewing my bad mood.
Totally. You're like, oh snap, I've been choosing the sad song for like 2 weeks, so somebody put on some electronic dance.
I've literally chosen sad songs for weeks or longer in my life.
Totally. Well, that's such a glorious example. That's when, when I was going through, well, I was actually having Kundalini awakening, which was this just whole electrifying, year-long, wild, completely wild. I had like precision crystal workers like moving the energy through my spine with these multi-$1,000 crystals that you could only get in certain countries because they were cut to such sharpness and the point, and they were working the energy through my spine so that it didn't like crystallize and solidify as it was moving up. It was just a whole odd, I was just like I was revelation. I was not receiving revelations. I was just like lightning pouring through my veins, like going through these massive calibrations. And so I was in this whole realm of consciousness of feel it to heal it for such a long time. And I was like, oh, there's more sadness. I got to go there. I got to feel it. I got to like feel it until I feel it all and it's transmuted permanently and there's ecstasy and only ecstasy left. So I was like doing this to myself, and I was in my space one day and I went to put on a sad song that like I knew would like help me to move the energy because I was having a hard time accessing it on my own without a catalyst. So I was like, okay, we'll just go do this. And I just had a moment of, why are you doing this to yourself, for starters? For seconders, why don't you actually just put on a song that will support you with dancing and smiling and the things that you know will make your DNA expand and evolve and will improve your health? Why are you actually putting yourself into a state that is proven to create disharmony and dis-ease ultimately in the physical body? Because there are so many spiritual things around, you must feel it to heal it. And I realized in that moment that I had that anchored in. And I was like, okay, well, let's play. Let's just put on the happy song, and not from a space of bypassing or evading the sad emotion, but from a space of pure choice, and see how that shifts my day. And it wound up being one of the most phenomenal days where I was so connected to that aspect of my being, like the pure innocence of a child, where you're just outside playing in the sunlight all day, not a care in the world, life is effortlessly breezy, and you feel renewed and replenished by life, just happy to be in the throes of nature and play and all of that. And I'm like, how many years have I been choosing motherfucking sad song? Like, why have I been doing this to myself?
Yeah.
And to just realize,
it's so interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just these simple things that, we are kings, queens, creator, gods, and form, and we do have this opportunity to choose. And so even in that, the perception of when things don't necessarily go according to our plan. So then this brings me back to our original podcast that we did together, the life sport of superabundance, where it's like, this might not actually be unfolding the way I think that it should. There may be some level of self-judgment in there because of that. And this is probably just the super intelligent part of me redirecting me to something much more magical and fulfilling if I can trust that thread of awareness. Not necessarily the plan or the step-by-step of how I think things are going to come to fruition or how I think they need to be or how I thought they were going to be, but just the trust that the actual step laid before me in this moment is leading me to the ultimate sense of wonder and enchantment, which is really what I'm looking to experience anyways. And to trust how that is unfolding itself, that might not look anything like what I thought it was going to look like.
Often won't. It's so interesting because like throughout this conversation, I've been like agreeing with you with like little asterisks.
I love
and
it.
and the sad song, like totally. And sometimes the quickest way through sadness for me has been to just be like, oh wow, I've been fighting my sadness for a month here. What if I just gave myself the afternoon to be sad? And like when I talk about building structure for the chaos, that's kind of what I mean. It's like giving myself, okay, I have today to feel this, and I'm going to feel it fully, and I'm going to play every sad. I'm going to find the saddest song. And usually, like on the other side of that, it's like, oh, I feel so much better. And sometimes after 3 songs, I'm like, okay, I'm done. And so it's so interesting because I resist prescription in the sense that like it really does depend on where I am, because like things that have worked for me don't work every time because the situations shift. And so sometimes like the way to choose the most loving high vibe thing is for me just to be in the sadness. Right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's been times where I've just kept the sadness alive way longer than I needed to because I hadn't built the structure or the acceptance of what was. Right? So there was like a resistance spin cycle. Right?
Yes.
And like the judgment of being, yeah.
Yes. Well, and that's a glorious example of that because it really is, where are we resisting? So sometimes the resistance is in not feeling the thing, and sometimes the resistance is actually to just simply
holding on to the thing,
to be happy, or yes, the thing, the structure, the needing it to be that certain way, which creates it's just resistance and a whole lot of density in our field, because we've now like created an obligation, like some kind of contractual obligation to how we think that. Yeah.
This is why like I bristle at people's obsession with methodology as opposed to purpose. And so like for me, my brand, Life Athletics, right? If my goal is to be fit, then there's so many different ways to do that, right? And what fit means to me, because that's an important question, just to and to use this as a metaphor, what does that like happy mean to you? What does loved mean to you, right? And then there's possibly different ways to get there. If we say, no, I need to work out this many times with this methodology, like to this level. Well, the first time I can't do that. It's like when people try to create goals with me, they're like, I'm going to meditate every day for a year. It's like the first day you miss, you fucked
totally
up. And like that could be on day 2. And what, you're done for the year? Right? Like,
yeah.
So
the compassion and the listening. I mean, I feel
ourselves.
Yes, that's it. I think that's the greatest mastery skill, because it's, even in the context of, it's just change is the only thing that is like our faithful companion. And so it's like, what do I need in this moment? What do I want in this moment? What do I desire in this moment? It's just in this moment. Because me waking up at 6 a.m. one day, the sun's starting to rise, blaze bright. It feels so good to just have like a delicious green tea with some MCT oil and blend up a delicious drink. And I'm like lit, and I'm sunshine, and I'm radiance, and I'm running, and like I just feel so energized and high on life. And then the whole day I'm like doing stuff, but it's from such a space of free energy and leverage that it's like being a kid again. And then if I try to duplicate that exact thing in that exact way the next day and the next, and then it's not happening, and I'm getting upset with myself because I'm like, why did it work the other day and now it's not working again? But it's because leading up into that point, I had been faithful not to the regimen or not to the specific order of things, but I had been faithful to listening to myself in the moment, which created a more of a holistic, integrative, grand harmonization of my being that allowed for that to be. So it's just, actually, I had a beautiful friend. Sometimes I need like a catalyst to cry, and actually just being witnessed is something where I'm like, can I just talk about this thing? Can I just express, just to have the space held? And sometimes it moves it, and it's the most refreshing thing. It's like jumping in the ocean. It's like, I had just like, it had just been brimming there, and I like couldn't, that catalyst wasn't there, but thank you for just 10 minutes, just for 10 minutes and letting that move. And sometimes the most delicious thing is, well, wow, I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself to do these things in this specific way and to perform at this level. And according to whose standards, my own or some attempt to live up to some societal standard or structure in order for me to feel a sense of enoughness, maybe, but actually at this point, I think it's just so habitual. It's like just getting out of that groove of this is what it requires. Because when I'm not in that groove, I am creating an exorbitant amount of resources doing maybe 2% of what is recommended by some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the online space. Like, I don't do any of those things. And I know that my revenue is probably triple to 5 times, and just from a numbers perspective, from a mathematical perspective. And I have to remind myself of that because there's still something in my being. And this is what I'm curious about, because it's in this realm, but it's also in other realms that we've been speaking into. It's like, what is that thing in me, that underlying friction or resistance that is compelling me in this direction that I know is ultimately, 1, not true for me, and 2, not even effective for me, but there's some compelling force or some pull that continues to draw me in that realm. And it's to just acknowledge I'm actually an exemplar of infinite potentials and possibilities, which means precisely that. It means we take off all the rules, we let go of all the shoulds and have-tos and structures, and we actually align to what is true for you and what do you want, because there's no resistance there. And the no resistance is the magic, is the leverage, is the frequency doing the work. So what we're actually trying to do is live in accord with our truth constantly to keep our flow open. And that might not look anything like what we've been told it's supposed to look like in order for the thing to unfold. So it's like, what is your spot of living in that field of non-resistance in a proactive way, not in a passive way?
It's an intriguing thing, if I can jump in here. The idea of unlimited potential and freedom. I love these ideas. And as you might be getting used to, I have some resistance to them. And why is like the most potential? Blank page. This one even has lines on it, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, if I want to live in ultimate potential, then blank page. You can't actually do anything on that page and stay in unlimited potential.
Is
right?
that
So
true?
But what I mean is, like, if I go in one direction, I didn't go in that direction. Now, can you go at another time? Yes. But I've seen people whose whole businesses are built around the concept of freedom, not allow themselves to buy a house and get dogs and get in a relationship, because that wasn't the freedom lifestyle. That was a regular life. And so maybe that's what I'm reacting to a little bit, right? at some point, like a baby might be the representation of pure potential.
Yeah.
Like in the movie, The Incredibles, the Pixar superhero movie, the Jack, the baby, has all of the powers. Because he's a baby,
of course.
right? So he has all of the potential.
Yeah.
Whereas like the dad's the strong one, the mom is the flexible one, the son has sort of ADD and he moves really fast, and the teenage daughter just wants to disappear and she's invisible, right? And then the baby has potential. And yet as we grow, so there's just something there about the pressure that comes up in my system that might be all me around living in like total potential, because I'm actually choosing directions all the time, which is like sort of closing doors. And so like, and yet it's infinite. So there's an infinite number of doors still.
Yes.
There's an infinite number of blank pages and canvases that I can then play with.
Yeah.
But it's this intriguing concept that, my human mind is ping-ponging or pinballing, that's the word, around my head.
That unto itself, I think, can be a source of great overwhelm. But the way that I experience the potential is the energy. It's the free energy. So where there's no resistance and the energy is able to move through our system, our consciousness, our field, completely unbridled, unencumbered by anything. So the potential to me is the energy. The purpose or the possibility that we select is what we utilize that potential to crystallize. So bringing having access to our infinite potential, for me, represents having access to our infinite flow of energy. And then from that point, we get to leverage that energy to direct our reality and our experience. And usually one of those two things is out of balance. It's like someone's either got full access to their potential and they're in flow, but they've got zilch for direction. And so therefore they float around in life, and the great cosmic ocean carries them from one creative landscape to the next, and it all seems to be quite out of their control, and they're allowing other aspects of consciousness to influence and direct their experience for them because they're not a choice. So there's just living in that pure flow and allowing everyone and everything else to essentially choose for you, because if you're not choosing, someone else is. And then there's the space of being in pure possibility. But if we're in pure possibility, but we're not connected to our potential, that's where it can be kind of a drain, because we're moving and we're going and we're doing and we're clear and we're precise and we're directed and we're all of this, but we're not fully connected. So having both on board, and I mean, this is a tricky realm to dance in. Infinite potentials and possibilities. Like, what do we choose? And am I going to make the right choice? And what, it's like, there's so many creative landscapes that I could design or create. And like, this one's been great and it's fun. Is it fun anymore? Do I need to shift it? Do I need to close down that portal and open up a new one and just usher myself into a whole new creative landscape? And what does that look like? And we have this access constantly wherever we are. We can literally just go into, because we are the eternal now. And this is even, beyond creation, because all potentials and possibilities have already been fully created. We don't have to create them. So this actually even takes the doing out of the creation, the equation, and we get into our more Syrian, Egyptian, Pleiadian, I'm hearing, creator intertechnology, where it's like, I actually just get to resonate and elucidate that frequential timeline, and I can teleport to it. I don't have to, literally, that week, a series of synchronicities will unfold that take me directly into that reality, and I didn't need to build the 10-year bridge to get there. I just selected it visually and frequentially, and it allowed it to come into being. And so then the question is, what do we want to experience? And are we in the fluidity of our own soul's draw towards greater novelty and wonder in the way that enthralls us uniquely?
I feel like we could talk for hours about each one of these sections.
Mm-hmm.
You'll talk for a little bit, and I'm like,
Yeah,
all right, there's like 18 different directions that we can go into, because the the teleportation to another space, right? I've used a metaphor that a week ago, someone shared a story that they've experienced in their life. I thought I sort of made it up as theory, like it was a fairly educated guess, a hypothesis. But a lot of my coaching is about what vision do you want to live into, right? Inside of infinite potential, inside of the multiverse of possibility, which do you want to choose, right? And we go and we do some work and try to find what feels the best, and then who's the you that would naturally be living that, and how can you start being that right now, here in the moment, and sometimes just by degrees, right? Again, that building capacity concept. And I've seen many people's lives change quickly, transform really, when they give that permission to themselves. What I've sometimes used is this idea of, if you were bonked in the head and didn't remember who you were, right?
Yes.
Then, like, would that make it easier? Like, and then you could just be anything. Would you choose what you've been doing, or would you choose something else? Because so often people say, I can't because this. And I have different exercises built around that. But this woman that I was talking to, she said that, like, she was asking me about my head injury, and she asked me if I had had any memory issues. I said, minor. Every once in a while I struggle to find a word, whereas I don't think I struggled as much before, but it's pretty minor. And she said, she asked me because an ex-boyfriend of hers had had a head injury, had trauma, completely functional afterwards when he woke up, complete amnesia. So he could speak, right? But he couldn't remember anything about his life. And when people started telling him about his life, he didn't particularly like who they were describing. And so he reinvented himself from whatever place was created in that blank trauma space. He's like, I want to go this way. And so she said that, like, when she met him, it was after this, and he was the nicest guy she'd ever met by far, just completely lit up internally and empowered, and he was choosing himself. And apparently, and this just gets even more fantastical, he went to Egypt and climbed the pyramids at some point, and all of his memories came back while on top of the pyramids.
Wow.
And that, but he was able to still retain his chosen self.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so beautiful. And so that idea of allowing that teleportation, right? Because there are areas where I've allowed the teleportation and big, huge shifts. And there's areas where I've held on to my pain as precious. And yeah, no amount of visioning has allowed me to just launch forward. And so, like, I had to stop and unpack the trauma as best as I could, realizing that pathway had boulders in front of it that needed to be cleared before I could. And maybe there's some other way, but that's the only way that I've been able to find to clear that energetic space.
Yeah. I've just become a black hole to the best of my capacity. Although I will say, in the space leading up to that, I can be a little bit resistant to it when I've built for so long. And actually, in this whole kind of few month portal of, like, glitchy, I have felt that several times. I'm like, and this is not common for me at all, even during my greatest calibrations, where I'm just like, where am I? Like, having these kind of, like, real deep moments of, who am I? Where am I? Like, where is, like, my quintessence, my soul, my indomitable spirit, and kind of surrendering into, because that's the pillar, right? It's our spirit, our soul, the indomitable spark that is always there with us, and having certain moments of not feeling access to it for the first time ever. And I saw a sign that said, and you know that when your reality is speaking to you in like a mystical, we'll call it evocative initiation speak, where just some part of you is speaking to you from the deep reservoir of reality itself. And it was just so loud and clear. It said, leave it all behind. And I was like, whoa. And so I've just been being in this space of, and this has been ongoing, I would say, for a year, actually, being in the questioning space of what I know is possible as this self, knowing expanded dimensions of my own being, but even in it, recognizing that, well, there really is no world. There really is no collective. There really is no shared collective consensus reality where we all have to put our hands and feet together to make this new earth experience unfold itself. It's actually, we are just creating and selecting our reality right where we stand. And that's it. And to have the awareness of that fluidity, which I was even just in the space of that for a while, like as the self, understanding itself, like the mechanisms of mind, and really wanting to see clearly how is this logos operating? What is actually happening here? Which one is true? Well, they're all true, right? Depending upon the one that we select and adhere to. But at a more malleable, it's fractal. It just fractals out. Oh, you want this paradise? Okay, you go on this infinite earth. You be in this infinite earth. It already exists. It's already here. Do you want to select that earth? Or do you want to be on this one where everything's being rebuilt and reconstructed and redesigned? Or do you want to go to New Earth Nation that already exists? And there's all these different, and it is so contingent upon what we have going on in our own landscape. And when I really started to play with the malleability of that, I was having these massive, these beings coming into my world with these massive, avatars and life beyond purpose, so to speak. Actually just being purpose personified. And then what does one do? How does one live? And what is it like to live in these actualized realities, these actualized descended timeline realities, and to actually pivot into them now, here, now, on this earth, without having to take the Newtonian path of developing, creating, building, designing, constructing, but to actually select them like we do all of our other desires. So it's even the questioning of, for such a sophisticated species in a lot of ways, we know how to create all the kind of mundane things that we want to experience in our reality. But when it comes to changing the world, why do we think that the mechanism is any different? And why aren't we harnessing the mechanism to change the world from the inside? Now that fascinates me. So being with all of this and then going,
I want to speak to that real.
Yeah. Well, so just real quick, it's which game do I want to play? And do I actually even want to play in any of these games? Because to be quite honest, a lot of them are just not interesting to me anymore. Magic, enchantment, snake charming, wilderness. Yes, please, let's do Tantra, real living in Tantra with that direct dialogue in the soul of the world from moment to moment, and just being fully with the quintessence of self in all things. That fascinates me. All these different portals fascinate me. A lot of the other storylines just aren't doing it for me anymore. Please.
I don't think that they're doing it for a lot of people anymore. I do think that what game do I want to play is a powerful question, but I mean, it fits into life athletics, and it's a game I ask a lot. I think that we're all playing games, we're all winning the games that we're playing. And so I do think it's incumbent on us to question, do I want to keep doing this, or do I want to lead in some other direction? But the change the world bit was really what I wanted to jump on, because people talk about that all the time. I want to change the world. We're changing the world by being here. By me breathing, I'm altering the air around me. Because I live in this house, no one else is living in this house, which means they're living somewhere else, which is impacting, so I'm already changing the world. It's such a low level game. So change to what? Most people don't know when asked, what would the world be if it was healthy by your estimation? What would you be if you were healthy by your estimation? People are so obsessed with healing, but they haven't stopped generally to say, what does healed look like? And so this is so much where my questioning comes in of like, I did a talk on this the other day. It's something called the Integrated Masculine Symposium. And it was find your purpose, find your path. And I talked about like finding your purpose is, what do you want the world to be? And you can find different areas and different places of interest. And then we sort of chunked it down to this, like the self level, living into the world you want. What would you be doing? And people had all sorts of different realizations that they and their partner had shared goals, but they were dealing with, one was dealing at the home level, and one was dealing on the global level. And so they were frustrated because it looked like they weren't aligned. And this allowed them to realize, no, we're on the same team. We're just handling different aspects of it. And there was this immense relaxation inside of that. But I do think it's important for us to say, what game am I playing? And to say, like, if none of these work, what would I create?
Yeah.
Right? Like, as someone who's taught in schools and who's coached different sports, and like, it's important sometimes to realize, like with Ultimate Frisbee, right? If you don't have enough people to play a regular game, there's lots of other options. And it can be super fun to roll with what is and find a game that meets the idea of, like, if I'm coaching Ultimate, having fun, improving skill, improving game understanding, camaraderie, closeness, right? If these are the games I'm playing, upping the levels of these, right? Getting all pissy because we didn't have enough of a turnout one day because it rained or something, right? Doesn't serve. So, like, abandoning the structure, right? Not being obsessed with methodology, like I said earlier, but instead saying, okay, what game, like, if that's the game I want to play, right? The game isn't Ultimate Frisbee. The game is connection and fitness and vitality and fun and connectedness. Well, how can I adapt using this piece of round plastic? Right? And the people who are here. And I think it's the same thing in life. It's like, how can we adapt to have our ultimate purpose and not be obsessed with the methodology and the delivery system that we think is it? Because that's usually not the point.
Right. Thank you so much. And we're like getting at almost at the 2-hour mark here. I imagine we could go forever and ever and ever. Are we playing the game that we want to play? Are we connected to our full power and our full joy? And is it truly what inspires us? Because like you're saying, it's not the structure, even it's not that it is Frisbee. It's that you feel alive while you're doing it and in connection to other people and your health. So it's even just to what makes you come erotically alive. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's so just bringing like eroticism into it. Like you're talking earlier about like the trap that a lot of people fall into of like trying to force my morning routine is this, or I'm going to force my bliss, right? And I had the idea, like the image of someone trying to force an orgasm.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
not a satisfying. No.
Yeah.
Even if it does, it's like.
Yeah. There's like no juice there.
Yeah. And so it's like this thing where, yes, there are certain things that can lead to that release, but it's the presence, and it's that curiosity and realizing that, yeah, the thing isn't the thing. So often, like, sexual release isn't the thing, right?
No,
Making a
it's
lot of money isn't the thing. Being like super fit, like Guy Ritchie says it really beautifully in this one interview on the what used to be called the Nerdist podcast, and he said sometimes you have to pick up the trophy to realize that it's hollow.
Oh, God, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's just, right, and it's what we're actually looking for is the substance of the grail, not the grail itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great wrap up statement. I love it so much.
Uh-huh.
My middle name is Arturo, which is the Spanish form of Arthur, because my mother is so obsessed with Arthurian legend.
Yeah.
And so the grail is so tightly intertwined with that. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor. To sort of wrap this up with, like, not to lose sight of what the quest is. It's not for a cup. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. So many juicy places and spaces, and I feel like just seeing like a neural network in a mind, we just went down like a couple of those little pathways. There's so much more that we could delve into. We have like a whole entire season of episodes just laced throughout this conversation.
That'd be fun to do. I mean, like when talking with someone who's kind of an embodiment of absolute potential and infinite energy, it's like there's a lot of different directions that can be had. So yeah, I appreciate that. It's so much fun for me.
Yeah. An absolute delight as always, and I'm excited to more dancing, more playing, co-weaving, co-creating, and I just so deeply love you and value your presence in my life. So thank you for thank you for being you, and thank you for I love how you're the richness with which you're grounded in, I would say like a kind of like an integrative, holistic kind of love. Like you just have this all-encompassing awareness of what love is, and your capacity to see things from a multitude of angles simultaneously, and to have a sense of curiosity around each of those streams, and to be able to hold them all with equal, we call it honor, love, harmony, non-judgment, just to be able to be with the fullness of each of them, and to go, and to just follow each one of those threads, and to do so with such a level of sophistication and mastery from the level of consciousness is just quite exquisite to be with, and to play in that realm with you. So thank you.
I feel so tickled. I'm going to take this part of the recording and listen to that again. It was just great. It'll be part of my morning routine.
Yeah.
Anchored into that space.
Right, while you're drinking your green tea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love you. I hope that you have a marvelous day in Bali, and I am going to go outside and maybe do a little bit of
Love it. Love you. Thank you so much. And until next time, happy howling.
Thank you. Bye, Nick.
Bye.